My name is Margaret Holloway, and I am 79 years old. I have lived in this village all my life, in the same old stone house my parents left behind. But what I'm about to share with you is not about bricks or inheritance. It's about the night I leaned over a moss-covered rim, and the earth itself seemed to whisper my name. That well. The forgotten well at the edge of our property, sealed for nearly a century, hidden by vines and silence. That night, when the wind shrieked like 1,000 restless spirits, I saw it again. The heavy stones that had long kept it closed were scattered as if some invisible hands had hurled them aside. My lantern shook in my trembling grasp. And then, from the black mouth of that well, there came a sound. A low cry, weak, desperate, human. I swear to you it wasn't just the wind. It was a voice. I leaned closer, my breath misting in the cold air, and the voice grew clearer, whispering a name. Name. Margaret. Slowly, steadily, like someone buried alive was calling to me. My heart slammed against my chest, and in that frozen moment, I felt the ground beneath my feet tilt, as if it wanted to swallow me whole. I should have run. I should have turned back. But I didn't. And that was my greatest mistake. You want to know how this began, don't you? Then let me take you back, before the voice, before the night air filled with things I couldn't explain. Let me start where it all truly began. The story begins with a summer day, bright and ordinary, when the village children ran past my gate. I remember standing on the porch, fanning myself with a newspaper, watching them play tag near the meadow. But even in the warmth of that afternoon, I noticed something strange. The weeds by the old well were shifting, though there was no wind. Something hidden was waking. I dismissed it at first. After all, wells are nothing new here. Nearly every house in the village once had one. But this one, our family's well, had been closed for decades. My grandmother had ordered it sealed when I was a girl. She never explained why, only said, "Nothing good comes from drawing water there." And so the stones were placed, and the vines grew, and eventually it was forgotten. Or so I thought. That evening, as the sun bled into the hills, I heard the first sound. Hollow knocking, like fists against wood, came from the yard, from the direction of the well. At first, I told myself it was only a branch tapping against the barn. But when I stepped outside, every tree stood still. The knocking came again, 3 times, deliberate, echoing through the ground. I felt my legs weaken, yet curiosity gripped me tighter than fear. I walked to the edge of the overgrown patch where the stones rested. They looked undisturbed, heavy as always, but I swear I saw the vines twitch, curling away from the rocks as if recoiling from something beneath. I hurried back inside, bolting the door. I told myself I was imagining things. But in my heart I knew better. 2 nights later, I dreamed of the well. In my dream, the stones were gone, and the water shone like glass. Beneath its surface floated the reflection of a child, a boy with pale skin and hollow eyes. He raised his hand to me, and his lips moved, though no sound came. I jolted awake, sweat soaking my nightgown, the image burning behind my eyes. Dreams are just dreams, I told myself. But the next morning when I stepped outside, I found fresh scratches on the stones around the well. Long grooves, like fingernails dragging desperately across rock. My stomach knotted. Someone or something was trying to get out. I decided to ask old Thomas, the village mason, about the well. He was nearly 90 and remembered more of this village's secrets than anyone else. But when I mentioned it, his face paled. He set down his trowel and whispered, "That well should never be opened. Your grandmother knew the truth." I pressed him, but he only shook his head, refusing to say more. That silence frightened me more than words could. The days that followed grew heavier, as though the air itself thickened around the house. Birds avoided the yard. My dog Samson would not step near the well, growling if I tried to coax him. And every night, just as the clock struck midnight, the knocking returned. Louder, closer, until it sounded as though it was beneath my very floorboards. By then I could no longer ignore it. Something was inside that well, something alive or something that wished to be. And as much as I feared it, a part of me felt drawn, as if my name was carved into its darkness. I told myself I'd never go near it, never touch those stones. But we both know what I did. Because one night I walked outside, lantern in hand, and found the stones already moved. And from the hollow blackness of that well, a voice whispered my name. And that was when everything changed. But the truth of what I saw when I peered into that darkness, that will have to wait. I remember leaning over that gaping hole, the lantern trembling in my hand, and for a moment I thought I saw nothing but blackness. Black so thick it swallowed the light whole. But then the voice came again. Clearer. Closer. Margaret. My knees nearly buckled. My name echoed up the shaft as if the well itself had lips. I wanted to believe it was some trick of the wind, the way sound carries strangely through the fields at night. But deep down I knew it wasn't the wind. The voice was soft, pleading, almost childlike. I forced myself to back away, my heart hammering in my chest. Samson barked from the porch, for standing on end. That dog had never been afraid of anything. Not thunder, not strangers, not the wild dogs that sometimes came down from the hills. But that night, he growled so fiercely I could hear the rattle in his throat. It was as though he could see what I couldn't. I tried to sleep afterward, but the house felt alive with whispers. The walls creaked, the floors groaned, and every sound seemed to circle back to that one word. My name. I shut my ears with the pillow, yet still it reached me, soft and insistent. Margaret. The next morning I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Old women see shadows where there are none, I told myself. But when I stepped outside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The stones that had covered the well, heavy stones no single person could move, were scattered across the grass like pebbles. Some lay yards away, as though flung with impossible force. The vines that had once strangled the stones were shriveled, their roots blackened as if burned from within. And on the rim of the well, in the thin layer of moss, were handprints. Small, child-sized handprints pressed deep into the green. My lantern slipped from my fingers. I could no longer tell myself this was my imagination. I wanted answers, but Thomas refused to give them. When I confronted him again, he turned his back and muttered, "Don't feed it, Margaret. Don't answer it. If you do, it won't let you go." His hands shook as he worked, and I could see in his eyes he knew more than he dared say. I went home furious, but fear gnawed at me. I tried to stay away from the well, tried to live as though it didn't exist. But that night, as I sat by the fire with Samson at my feet, I heard it again. Not from the well this time. From inside my house. The knock came from beneath the floor. 3 hollow raps. My blood turned to ice. Samson leapt to his feet, barking at the boards as though something were scratching at the other side. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound only grew louder, echoing through the beams and walls. And then the voice followed, muffled but unmistakable. "Margaret, please." I staggered back, clutching the mantel to steady myself. My house had become an echo chamber for whatever lived in that well. It was inside now, slithering through the walls, calling my name. I tried to flee. I grabbed my coat, yanked open the front door, but froze in the doorway. The yard was different. Silent. The usual night sounds, crickets, owls, the rustle of the hedges, were gone. The world outside was utterly still, as though the earth itself held its breath. And then I saw it. A figure standing by the well. Small, pale, motionless. My lantern barely reached it, but I could see enough. Boy. He looked no older than 10, his hair damp and stringy, his clothes ragged. His head hung low, as though too heavy for his neck. My heart cracked. If it was a child, how long had he been trapped there? But some part of me screamed this wasn't a child. It wasn't human at all. The boy lifted his head slowly, and when he did, I saw his eyes. D-sockets. Hollow pits where eyes should have been. And yet, though he had no eyes, I felt his gaze burn through me. I slammed the door and collapsed against it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Samson whined, pawing at me, his body trembling as much as mine. For the first time in my life, I felt truly hunted, as though my name had become a tether, dragging me toward something that should never have been awoken. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in the chair with Samson pressed against my legs, the fire burning low. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every flicker of shadow looked like the boy's form waiting to step through the doorway. By dawn, I was a hollow shell. I told myself I'd leave the house, go stay with my niece in town until I could make sense of what was happening. But when I opened the door, something stopped me cold. Carved into the wood of the porch, deep and jagged, was one single word. Stay. The letters were uneven, as though scratched by small, desperate hands. I dropped to my knees, my throat tightening, tears pricking my eyes. I was trapped. Not by locks or walls, but by something older, something darker, that refused to let me leave. And in that moment I knew. The forgotten well had not been sealed to keep us out. It had been sealed to keep something in. And now it was free. But the worst part was yet to come. Because that very night I would learn what happens when you answer the voice that calls your name. Night fell heavy, pressing against the windows like a weight. I tried to keep busy, chopping wood, tending to the fire, cooking stew I didn't have the appetite to eat. Anything to keep my hands from trembling, anything to keep my thoughts from circling back to the voice in the well and the boy with hollow eyes. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every corner of the room seemed darker than it should be, shadows clinging like cobwebs. Samson followed me from room to room, never more than a step behind. His ears twitching at sounds I couldn't hear. By the time the clock struck midnight, the house had grown so still I could hear my own heartbeat. And then came the sound that split me open. It wasn't a whisper this time. It wasn't a knock beneath the floorboards. It was a laugh. A child's laugh, thin, breathless, playful. Came from the well, but I swear it also came from inside the walls. The sound danced around me, circling the room like invisible hands. My blood turned cold. I clutched Samson's fur, feeling his body stiffen as he growled deep in his chest. Then came the voice again, brighter, clearer, no longer muffled. Come play, Margaret. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The fire sputtered and died as though smothered by unseen fingers, leaving only the faint glow of embers. In that dim light, I saw something move at the edge of the room. A shadow too small to be mine, too quick to be explained away. It darted across the floor, paused, and then rose upright. The outline of a boy. I staggered back, my breath ragged, but the shadow didn't advance. Instead, it stretched its arm, pointing toward the door, toward the well. I slammed my eyes shut, whispering prayers I hadn't spoken since childhood. When I opened them again, the shadow was gone. But the door stood ajar, though I knew I had bolted it tight. Cold air crept inside, carrying the scent of damp earth. Something wanted me outside. Something wanted me near the well. I told myself I wouldn't go. I told myself I'd wait until morning. But curiosity is a cruel thing. Fear fights it, but in the end it always wins. By the time I realized it, I was already stepping outside, lantern in hand, Samson pressed tight against my legs. The yard was cloaked in mist. The grass was wet, though it hadn't rained. Every step toward the well felt heavier, as though the ground itself resisted me. And then I saw him again. Boy. He stood at the rim of the well, head lowered, arms dangling at his sides. His skin glistened pale in the lantern light, stretched too thin over bones that jutted unnaturally. Water dripped from his fingers, pattering against the stones. I should have turned back. Every part of me screamed to flee. But I couldn't. Something about him, broken and still, called to the part of me that once held children of my own. I took a step closer and then another. Who are you? My voice cracked like dry wood. The boy lifted his head. His empty sockets stared through me. And then his lips moved. Forgotten. The word hung in the air, heavy, final. My lantern flickered. Samson barked wildly, circling me, his tail low, his body rigid. I stumbled back, but my heel caught on a stone and I nearly fell. That's when the boy's expression changed. His lips stretched into something that might have been a smile, though it twisted too wide, too sharp. His jaw unhinged farther than it should, and from his throat came not a child's voice, but a chorus. 1,000 voices, old and young, male and female, rising together like a storm. Stay with us. The ground trembled. Stones rolled away from the well's rim, clattering into the darkness below. The mist thickened, curling around my ankles, tugging me toward the hole like hands reaching up from the depths. I screamed and stumbled back toward the house, Samson snapping at the air as if fighting invisible foes. The boy's figure blurred in the mist, fading until he was no longer flesh but shadow. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shaking stopped. The mist lifted. The yard was empty. But I wasn't free. Because when I staggered back into the house, gasping for breath, I found something waiting on my table. An old wooden spinning top, worn smooth from use, its paint chipped and faded. I hadn't seen one like it in years, not since my own childhood. And carved into its side, in tiny letters barely visible by lantern light, was my name, Margaret. I dropped it to the floor, the sound echoing far louder than it should have. My knees gave out and I sank into the chair, clutching Samson like a lifeline. Tears stung my eyes. Whatever this was, it wasn't just haunting me. Knew me. It had known me all along. The forgotten well had not chosen me by chance. And as I sat there shaking, I realized something far worse than the voice, the boy, or the shadow. This wasn't just a spirit crying out for help. This was a hunger. And hunger never stops. The night stretched on, each minute crawling by like an hour. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think beyond the spinning top still lying on the floor. By dawn, I decided I had to find the truth. Someone in this village knew what lay beneath that well, and I wouldn't rest until I dragged the answer out of them. But what I didn't know then, what I would learn too late, was that the answers would demand a price. And not everyone who had peered into the well had come back to tell the tale. Stay with me because the next step I took led me straight into the past, and into secrets that should have stayed buried forever. I left the spinning top on the table, though its presence gnawed at me like a worm in fruit. I couldn't bring myself to touch it again, not after seeing my name carved into its side. Samson growled at it whenever he passed, his hackles rising as though it carried a stench only he could smell. I knew I couldn't face the well again without answers. Someone in this village knew why it had been sealed, why children's laughter now drifted up from its depths. My mind kept circling back to Thomas, the caretaker of the old chapel. He had tried to warn me before. Perhaps he knew more than he dared admit. By morning, I found him sweeping the church steps. His shoulders stooped beneath the weight of years and secrets. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. "You went near it again, didn't you?" His voice was weary, not surprised. "I heard it," I said. "I saw it, boy." He knew my name, Thomas. "He left something in my house." Thomas's broom clattered to the ground. His face paled, lips trembling as though he'd seen a ghost. "It's begun again," he whispered. "I told them it wasn't sealed tight enough. I told them it was only sleeping." I seized his arm, desperation making me fierce. "What is it? What's in that well?" He looked around, as if afraid the shadows of the churchyard might overhear him. Finally he spoke, his voice low and broken. "It was before your time, Margaret. Before mine too, though I grew up with the stories. Children went missing. Not once, not twice, dozens over the years. Always the same way. A voice would call to them in the night. Soft, sweet, familiar. And they'd go to it. No one ever saw them again." My stomach nodded. The boy, was he one of them? Thomas shook his head slowly. "No. The boy is the bait. The well shows you what you'll follow. Some see a lost child, others a parent, a lover. It knows your heart, Margaret. It knows exactly how to lure you in." His words sliced through me. I thought of the boy's empty sockets, his thin frame dripping with water. But I also thought of the voice that called my name. Soft pleading. Familiar. Thomas saw the terror in my eyes. He gripped my shoulders, his voice shaking. You must not answer it. Promise me. No matter what you hear, no matter what you see. Do not speak to it. Once you answer, it owns you. I wanted to promise. I opened my mouth to say the words. But then an image flashed in my mind. My brother Daniel, the way he looked before he vanished all those years ago. 10 years old, hair damp from the rain, eyes wide with fear as he ran into the woods. He was never found. And suddenly I understood. The well hadn't just chosen me by chance. It had chosen me because I had already lost someone. Thomas's grip tightened. Do you hear me, Margaret? But I couldn't answer. My throat closed around the memory. I left the chapel in silence, my mind spinning. Could it be possible? Could the voice belong to Daniel? After all these years, could my brother still be calling for me? The day dragged by in a haze. I tried to distract myself with chores, but every shadow seemed to whisper. By dusk, exhaustion weighed heavy on me, but I knew sleep would not come. The house itself felt restless, the air thick with waiting. That night, as the clock struck 12, the voice came again. Not from the well this time. From my bedroom. I froze under the quilt, heart hammering as the air chilled around me. The voice was soft, broken. Maggie! Only Daniel had ever called me that. My chest tightened, tears stinging my eyes. It was his voice. His exact voice. The years melted away, and I was 10 again, chasing after him in the rain. Samson growled, his body pressed close to mine, but even he couldn't drown it out. Maggie, help me. Please. I clutched the blanket, torn between terror and longing. If there was even a chance it was truly him, how could I ignore it? But Thomas's warning echoed in my mind. Once you answer, it owns you. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, forcing myself to stay silent. Then came the knock. Not on the door. Not on the floorboards. From inside the closet. 3 slow, deliberate raps. Maggie! My breath hitched. The door creaked open on its own, inch by inch, until the dark inside seemed to spill into the room. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him. Presence waiting. The spinning top rolled across the floor from where I'd left it downstairs. It circled once, twice, then toppled at the foot of my bed. Samson barked wildly, lunging toward the closet, but then he stopped. His body went rigid. His bark broke into a whimper. And before my eyes, he backed away, tail tucked, ears flat, like a soldier retreating from an enemy too great to face. That was when I knew. Whatever stood in that closet wasn't Daniel. It wasn't anyone I had loved. It was wearing his voice, his name like a mask. I shut my eyes tight, whispering prayers, begging for morning to come. But the voice didn't fade. It grew louder, filling every corner of the room. Maggie! 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 And then the bed dipped, as though something had climbed onto it. The weight pressed against my legs, creeping closer. My body stiffened, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe. When I finally opened my eyes, the lantern flickered once more, and I saw the outline of a hand, wet and pale, resting on my quilt. I nearly screamed, but the sound died in my throat. The hand slid forward, reaching for my chest. And then, the hand upon my chest was colder than ice, its dampness soaking through the quilt, seeping into my very skin. I could not breathe, could not scream. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might shatter my ribs. The weight of it pressed heavier, and though my body begged me to move, to run, I lay there paralyzed. Maggie! The voice was now so close, it felt as though it came from inside my own skull. Don't you remember me? I wanted to deny it. I wanted to shout that it wasn't him, that my brother Daniel had been gone too long to sound so alive. But the cruel trick of memory is that it betrays you. In that moment I heard him. His laugh, the way he used to whisper secrets into my ear when we were children. And part of me, the weakest part, wanted desperately to believe it was him. The bed sagged again, as though another weight had joined the first. Then came the sound. Dripping water, steady and rhythmic, like droplets falling into a basin. The smell of damp earth filled the room, thick and suffocating. I knew then the well had followed me home. I clutched the rosary that hung around my neck, squeezing the beads until they cut into my palm. "You are not him," I whispered hoarsely, though my lips trembled. The hand froze. Then, slowly, it withdrew. The weight lifted from my chest, though the presence lingered. For a long, terrible silence, nothing moved. And then came the laughter. High-pitched, hollow, echoing. Not my brother's laughter, but the laughter of a dozen voices, maybe more. It filled the room, spilling from the closet, bouncing off the walls until it felt like the whole house was laughing at me. Samson howled and lunged toward the doorway, barking furiously. The closet door slammed shut with a force so violent it rattled the floorboards. The lantern flickered and went out. I sat there in the suffocating dark, frozen in place, until the first pale light of dawn crept through the curtains. Only then did I dare move. The closet was closed. The spinning top lay motionless at the foot of my bed. And the quilt was damp, as though rainwater had soaked into it. I knew I couldn't stay another night in that house without understanding what I was facing. Thomas had given me part of the truth, but not enough. Someone else knew the rest. And I knew exactly who that was. Old Mrs. Whittaker. She lived at the edge of the village, in a cottage draped in ivy. Her windows shuttered as though to keep the world out, or to keep something in. She had always been the whisper in every tale, the name mothers invoked when they wanted to hush their children. "Stay away from the well, or old Mrs. Whittaker will find you." I used to laugh at it when I was a girl. I wasn't laughing now. When I knocked at her door, she didn't answer. Not at first. I stood in the silence, ready to leave, when at last the shutter creaked open, and a pair of sharp gray eyes peered out. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice brittle but strong. "I need to know," I told her. "It's already come to me. It knows my name." Her eyes narrowed. She studied me for what felt like an eternity. Then, with a resigned sigh, she opened the door. Her cottage smelled of dried herbs and old wood. Every surface was cluttered with jars and books, and in the hearth burned a small fire, though the day was warm. She gestured for me to sit. "You're Margaret," she said, as if the name itself confirmed her suspicions. "Daniel's sister." The mention of his name made my chest tighten. "You knew him." She shook her head. "I knew what took him." I leaned forward, every muscle tense. "Then tell me. What is it?" Her gaze dropped to the fire. For a long while she didn't speak. When she finally did, her words chilled me. "The well is not just a hole in the ground. It is a mouth. A hunger. It feeds on longing, on grief, on the things we cannot let go. Every child it takes, every voice it mimics, it keeps to lure the next. That's why it called to you, Margaret. Because you never stopped listening for your brother's voice." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "But why? Why here?" Mrs. Whittaker's eyes flicked up, sharp and unyielding. "Because something was buried there. Long ago. Something that should never have been touched. They built the well over it, thinking the water would keep it contained. But water does not cleanse everything. Some things it only feeds." Her words struck me like stones. I thought of the dripping in my room, the smell of wet earth, the laughter that wasn't Daniel's. "Is there a way to stop it?" I asked, though my voice shook. She leaned closer, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "Perhaps. But it will ask for something in return. Something you may not be willing to give." Before I could ask what she meant, a noise outside shattered the moment. Faint cry. High and thin. The unmistakable sound of a child calling for help. It came from the direction of the well. Mrs. Whittaker's face drained of color. She clutched my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't go. That's not a child. That's for you." But I was already on my feet, my heart pounding in my ears. Because in that cry, I didn't just hear any child. I heard Daniel, calling me by name. I stumbled to the door, the cry growing louder, more desperate. My legs carried me toward it, even as every part of me screamed to turn back. Samson barked behind me, frantic, as though trying to stop me. The cry grew sharper, closer. I reached the edge of the trees, the path to the well opening before me like a wound. My breath caught in my throat as I saw movement there. Small, hunched, dripping with water. It was Daniel. Or at least it looked like him. His eyes were wrong. The figure at the well lifted its head, and though the face was Daniel's, pale and dripping, the eyes were wrong. They were too dark, too deep, like two bottomless holes that reflected no light. They seemed to pull me in, dragging at my very soul. "Margaret," it whispered, though the voice was soft, familiar, and almost tender. "I've been waiting so long." My knees buckled, and I gripped the rough bark of a tree to steady myself. Part of me wanted to run into his arms, to believe the impossible, that my brother had somehow survived, that all the years of grief had been for nothing. But deep down I knew. That thing was not Daniel. Samson barked furiously, his teeth bared, but his body refused to go closer. He stayed at my side, straining against some invisible force that repelled him from the well. His growl was low, constant, vibrating through his chest. The figure moved closer, water dripping with every step. Its clothes clung to its body, torn and rotted, yet its face remained untouched, perfect, familiar, cruel in its resemblance. "Come closer, Maggie," it said, holding out its hand. "Please, don't leave me alone again." The sound of his voice cracked something inside me. I remembered the night Daniel disappeared, how he'd called my name as he ran into the woods. I had followed but not far enough. I had stopped too afraid. And when morning came, he was gone. That guilt had eaten at me my whole life. Now the thing before me was using it. I can't," I whispered, my throat tight. Its smile widened, and that smile was not Daniel's. It was too sharp, too deliberate. "If you won't come to me, then I'll come to you." It moved faster, closing the space between us in a way that felt unnatural, as though the distance itself folded in half. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering, as the air grew thick with the smell of wet earth and rot. "Stay away from me," I cried, but my voice sounded weak, swallowed by the night. The figure stopped, tilting its head. Then it did something that made my blood run cold. It began to mimic Samson's bark. The sound came from its mouth, rough and broken, like a puppet poorly imitating a master. Bark after bark, until the sound twisted into laughter. Samson whimpered, backing away. I had never seen him retreat before. Behind the figure, the well gurgled, a sickening sound like something alive moving just beneath the surface. The ground trembled faintly, and the air grew colder. "You left me," the figure whispered, its voice dropping lower, more distorted. "You left me in the dark, Maggie. But now you'll stay with me forever." Its hand shot out, impossibly long, stretching farther than it should have. The fingers brushed my sleeve, clammy and strong. Panic surged through me. I tore free and ran, branches whipping at my face as I stumbled back toward the path. The laughter followed, echoing through the trees, chasing me all the way to Mrs. Whittaker's cottage. I banged on the door, gasping for breath, and she pulled me inside just as the air outside grew still again. "You looked at it, didn't you?" she demanded, her eyes fierce. "You listened to it." Tears streamed down my face. It looked like him, spoke like him. How could I not? Her expression softened, but only slightly. "That's how it works. That's how it wins. It doesn't need to drag you into the well, Margaret. All it needs is for you to believe." I sank into a chair, trembling. Then what do I do? How do I stop it? Mrs. Whittaker's gaze fell on the fire. For a long moment she was silent, the crackle of the flames the only sound in the room. Finally she spoke. "You must go back to the well. Not to answer it, but to face it. If you run, it will follow. If you hide, it will find you. But if you stand your ground," she trailed off, her lips pressing into a thin line. "But what?" Pressed. Her eyes met mine, hard as stone. "It will demand something from you. Something that cannot be returned. That is the only way to seal it again." I shook my head, the weight of her words crushing me. "And if I refuse?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then it will take everything you love instead." Samson whined softly at my feet, and I reached down to stroke his head. The thought of losing him, of losing anyone else, sent a shiver through me. Mrs. Whittaker handed me a small pouch filled with herbs and ash. Take this. It won't stop it, but it may give you strength. And remember, whatever it shows you, whatever voice it uses, you must not give it what it asks unless you are willing to pay the price. Her words echoed in my mind long after I left her cottage. The night was silent now, but silence can be worse than noise. Silence can be the sound of something waiting. When I returned home, the spinning top lay on the table again, though I had left it upstairs. This time it was already spinning, moving in slow, deliberate circles. I didn't touch it. I didn't dare. The house groaned, the windows rattling faintly, though no wind stirred outside. I sat in my chair, clutching the pouch, Samson pressed against my legs, as the night stretched long and heavy. And then, just as the clock struck midnight, I heard it again. Knock. Not from the door. Not from the closet. From beneath the floorboards. 3 slow, deliberate raps. And then Daniel's voice. Clear, desperate, heartbreakingly real. Maggie. Let me out. The sound of his voice beneath the floorboards rooted me to the chair. It wasn't the monstrous distortion I had heard at the well. It was soft, pleading, the voice of my brother as I remembered him. Daniel at 12 years old, begging me not to leave him behind. Maggie, it's so dark. So cold, please. Every instinct screamed that it was a trick, that nothing human could be speaking from beneath the floor of my sitting room. Yet the ache in my chest told a different story. What if? What if I had been wrong all these years? What if he had been trapped, calling, waiting? The spinning top on the table quickened, whirling faster and faster until it blurred, though no hand touched it. Samson growled low, pressing against me, but even his warmth couldn't stop the icy tendrils curling up my spine. I forced myself to stand. My legs trembled as I crossed the room, the knocks sounding again. 3 deliberate raps. Then silence. Then Daniel's whisper. You promised you'd never leave me, Maggie. I dropped to my knees, pressing my ear against the floor. The wood felt damp, swollen with moisture that hadn't been there before. The faint sound of dripping water echoed from below, steady and patient, like the slow beat of a heart. How are you here? I whispered, ashamed of the hope in my voice. The voice was quieter now, as if struggling. It pulled me down, kept me here. You can still save me. Open it, Maggie. Let me out. I scrambled back, bile rising in my throat. Open it. Tear apart the floor. Was that what it wanted? My hands shook as I gripped the pouch Mrs. Whittaker had given me. Her warning echoed in my head. Whatever voice it uses, you must not give it what it asks. But oh, how cruel that voice was. Samson barked suddenly, sharp and furious, as if to break the spell. His paw scratched at the wood, not in digging, but in warning, keeping me from laying my hand on the boards. The voice changed then, no longer pleading but impatient. Do you hear me, Maggie? I said let me out. I clutched the pouch to my chest, muttering words I didn't fully understand, the fragments Mrs. Whittaker had told me. The floor groaned, and for a moment the house seemed to breathe around me. The spinning top spun faster, until it toppled on its side, rattling before coming to a dead stop. Silence. I dared to believe it was gone, until the smell hit me. That same foul stench of wet earth and decay seeped from the cracks between the boards. Samson backed away, whimpering now, his tail tucked. The knocks came again, harder, angrier, making the very nails in the wood shake loose. Ring, ring, ring. Then a new sound, splintering. The boards began to crack, long, jagged lines splitting through the wood. From the gaps seeped a dark, thick water, pooling across the floor. I stumbled back, heart pounding, as something pale pushed upward against the boards. Fingers. Slimy, dripping fingers, curling around the edges of the break. No! I whispered, tears streaming down my face. No, you're not him. You're not Daniel. The thing below paused, and then that laugh, the one from the well, jagged, hollow, filled the room. The voice was deeper now, stripped of innocence. But you want me to be. The fingers clawed higher, dragging more of itself into view. I could see the shape of an arm now, slick with mud, veins black and swollen. My mind screamed to run, but my feet wouldn't obey. Then Samson leapt forward, snapping at the hand. His teeth sank in, and a shriek tore through the house, inhuman and piercing. The arm jerked back, vanishing beneath the boards, and the water began to recede as if sucked away by some unseen drain. I dropped to the floor, sobbing into my hands, shaking uncontrollably. Samson pressed against me, his fur damp from the spray of that foul water. He had saved me, but for how long? When I finally looked up, the damage remained. The floorboards were split, warped, blackened by stains that would never wash out. The spinning top was gone. And then I realized, gone, not toppled. Gone, vanished, as if it had never been there. The clock struck 1. The chime echoed hollowly, mocking me. I dragged myself to my chair, unable to think clearly, and prayed for dawn to come quickly. But dawn brought no peace. By morning, whispers floated through the village. Mrs. Whittaker had been found at her cottage, the door wide open, the fire cold. On her table lay a single item, the pouch she had given me, emptied of its contents. And she was gone. The news of Mrs. Whittaker's disappearance spread like wildfire. Some whispered she had wandered into the woods and lost her way, others that she had gone to stay with a distant cousin. But I knew better. The empty pouch on her table was not a sign of departure. It was a sign of surrender. She had given everything she had left to the well, and the well had taken her. For the first time in decades, I felt truly alone. The one person who understood, the one who had warned me, was gone. And now the responsibility was mine. Could not eat. I could not rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face. Not the twisted mockery from the night before, but his real face, the boy I had once run through fields with, whose laughter had filled our home. And then came the guilt. If I had chased him farther that night, if I had dragged him back by force, perhaps none of this would have happened. Perhaps the well would have stayed forgotten. But guilt does not undo the past. It only fuels the present. That night, I sat in my chair, Samson asleep at my feet, and I heard the whisper again. Not beneath the floor this time, but from the window. Maggie! The curtains swayed though no wind stirred. The glass rattled softly, as if a hand brushed against it. You know what you must do, the voice said. This time not Daniel's but Mrs. Whittaker's. Face it. I rose, trembling, and packed what little I thought I might need. A lantern, a Bible, a scrap of rope. I tied the pouch around my neck, though it was empty, for it felt like the last piece of her I had. And with Samson by my side, I walked into the woods. The path was colder than it had ever been. The trees loomed taller, their branches clawing at the sky like twisted fingers. Every sound, an owl, the rustle of leaves, made my heart leap. But the well was calling me. I could feel it tugging, a pull in my very chest, as though a string had been tied to my heart and was reeling me in. Last we reached it. The forgotten well. It looked different now, more alive. The stones were slick with black moss, water spilling over the rim though no rain had fallen. And from the depths came a sound, low, steady, like breathing. I stepped closer, lantern in hand, and the ground trembled faintly. Samson barked, standing between me and the well, but I laid a hand on his head. Stay, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was telling him or myself. The water rippled, and then, as before, a figure rose. Daniel. His face wet, his clothes tattered, his eyes pleading. Maggie, he said softly. You've come back. Please help me out. One touch is all it takes. I gripped the Bible until my knuckles whitened. You're not him. You never were. The figure's expression faltered, then hardened. Its voice deepened, echoing. Then what will you give me? What will you trade to close me in again? Mrs. Whittaker's warning echoed in my head. Asterisk, it will demand something from you. Something that cannot be returned. Asterisk. What do you want? Asked, my voice breaking. The thing smiled, water streaming from its lips. Your memory. Every piece of him you hold. Give me Daniel, and I will sleep again. The words struck like a blade. My whole life Daniel had lived in my memory. His laugh, his mischief, the way he'd call me Maggie when no one else did. If I gave that away, he would be gone forever. Not just his body but every trace of him. I fell to my knees sobbing. Why him? Why always him? The figure leaned closer, its eyes empty pits. Because you kept him alive. You fed me with your grief, your guilt, your longing. He was never mine until you made him so. Now choose. The water surged higher, splashing over the stones, soaking my dress. Samson barked wildly, his fur bristling, but I knew this was not his fight. This was mine. I looked at the Bible, at my trembling hands, at the empty pouch around my neck. Then I lifted my face, streaked with tears. I release him, I whispered. I release Daniel. You cannot have him because he is not here. He is gone. And I will not feed you any more. The figure shrieked, a sound so piercing I thought my skull would split. The water churned violently, rising, pulling at my feet as though it wanted to drag me in. But I clutched the Bible to my chest, shouting through the storm of sound. I forgive myself. I forgive the child I was. And I let him go. The ground shook, the stones of the well cracking, splintering. The figure writhed, its form unraveling, collapsing into streams of black water that spilled back into the pit. The smell of rot filled the air, then thinned, replaced by the clean scent of rain. And then silence. The water stilled. The well was just a hole again, broken stones and moss. I collapsed to the ground, clutching Samson as he pressed against me. His steady heartbeat grounding me. Tears poured freely, but for the first time in decades, they were not from guilt. They were from release. When I returned to the village at dawn, the air felt lighter. Mrs. Whitaker never came back, but the whispers ceased. The spinning top never appeared again. And though the well still stood in the woods, no one spoke of it. No one dared. Years have passed since that night. My hair is whiter, my hands weaker. Sometimes I still hear Daniel's laugh in my dreams, but it no longer hurts. It warms me. 'Cause I know he is not trapped. He is free and so am I. The forgotten well remains forgotten as it should. And if there is one lesson in all of this, it is this. Guilt is a well that never stops taking. If you feed it, it will consume you. But if you release it, truly release it, you can live again. So, when the voices of the past call out to you, do not answer. Some doors once opened cannot be closed. And some wells are best left forgotten. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, frightened you, or made you think, remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this.